They called him the King, but kings choose their kingdoms. Elvis Presley didn't choose Las Vegas. He was delivered there, locked in, and left to perform himself to death inside a hotel that treated him like a golden slot machine. Pull the lever, count the money, pull it again. By the time the contract was done with him, Elvis Presley hadn't made a record that mattered in years, hadn't been in a film since 1969, hadn't toured the world, hadn't grown. He'd just stood on a stage in the desert, night after night, until there was nothing left to stand on. The king before Vegas. To understand what Las Vegas took from Elvis Presley, you have to understand who he was before Vegas got him. In the summer of 1956, Elvis was 21 years old and already the most dangerous thing in American music. Not dangerous like a man with a weapon, dangerous like an idea you cannot unthink. He moved his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they filmed him from the waist up because the waist down was too much for American television. He was selling records faster than RCA could press them. He was the first rock and roll star in the truest sense, not just a singer, but a force of nature that parents feared and teenagers worshipped. And then came 1958. The army took him. He spent 2 years in West Germany. When he came back in 1960, something had shifted. It was not his voice. That dark, trembling instrument was still there, and it did not belong to any single genre. But the moment had shifted. The Beatles had arrived, and the British invasion had rewritten the rules of popular music. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, had decided that his boy would become a movie star rather than fighting for relevance on the charts. From 1960 to 1969, Elvis made 31 films. Not art films, not serious work. Musical comedies with thin plots, beach settings, formula scripts, and soundtracks designed to generate easy album sales. Films with titles like Blue Hawaii, Fun in Acapulco, and Spin Out. Films that made money and broke Elvis's spirit at the same time. Elvis hated them. People close to him said he was embarrassed by the movies, that he would read a script and call his friends and say, "How do they expect me to say this?" He wanted to act. He had shown genuine ability in Jailhouse Rock and King Creole in the late 50s. He wanted serious roles. Parker kept saying no. The formula was working, and the formula kept the machine running. By 1968, the formula had stopped working. The movies were bombing. The soundtracks were not charting. Elvis was 33 years old and culturally irrelevant for the first time in his adult life. That was when producer Steve Binder talked Parker into letting Elvis do a television special. No scripts, no formula, just Elvis on a stage in a black leather suit, playing music with old friends, remembering what he was. The 1968 comeback special aired in December of that year, and it was wool. Critics who had written Elvis off as a Hollywood joke watched and went quiet. Here was the real thing again. Dangerous, magnetic, the most charismatic performer alive. The special was the highest-rated television program of the year. Elvis was back. The world was watching. The question was what Parker was going to do with it. The Colonel did what he always did, and he made a deal. The Colonel's deal with the devil. Tom Parker. Let's talk about Tom Parker. His real name wasn't Tom Parker, it was Andreas Cornelis van Kook. He was born in Breda, the Netherlands, in 1909, and he came to America illegally sometime in the late 1920s. He never became a citizen. He never went back. The reason he couldn't go back, and this is important, was that he may have been wanted in the Netherlands in connection with the death of a young woman. The records are murky. Parker himself never talked about his past. What we know is this: he lived his entire life in America without legal immigration status and without a valid passport. That one fact, hold on to it. Because everything Parker did to Elvis Presley for the last 2 decades of his life can be understood through the lens of that one secret. A man without a passport cannot leave the country. And a manager who cannot leave the country cannot manage a client who tours internationally. So Tom Parker made sure Elvis Presley never toured internationally. Think about what that means. The Beatles played Tokyo, London, Hamburg, Sydney. The Rolling Stones built a global empire by going everywhere. Elvis Presley, the original, the one they all borrowed from, never performed outside North America. Not once. Not in his lifetime. Not a single international show. Parker always had excuses. Logistics, money, timing. But the real reason was the passport. The real reason was that if Elvis went to London, the Colonel could not go with him. And if the Colonel could not go with him, Tom Parker could not control what happened over there. So when the 1968 comeback special reminded the world that Elvis Presley was a once-in-a-generation talent, Tom Parker did not see a world tour waiting to happen. He saw a hotel contract. The International Hotel in Las Vegas was set to open in the summer of 1969. It was the largest hotel in the world at the time, with 1,500 rooms, a showroom that held 2,000 people, and a new ownership group that needed a signature act to put their property on the map. Alex Schufe, the hotel's president, went to Parker. Parker saw numbers. He always saw numbers. The deal they worked out was this. Elvis would play 4 weeks in the summer of 1969, an opening run of 57 shows. The guarantee was $400,000 for that first engagement. It was the highest guarantee ever paid to a single entertainer in Las Vegas history. Elvis said yes. He didn't know what he was really agreeing to. What the contract actually said, here is what Parker negotiated and what he did not. The money was real. $400,000 for the first engagement was genuinely extraordinary for 1969, and it went up from there. In subsequent years, Elvis earned over $1 million per engagement. For 2 engagements a year, that was real money, serious money, the kind of money that made it hard to argue with the arrangement. But look at the terms underneath the money. Parker negotiated a 5-year deal, later extended, that locked Elvis into 2 engagements per year at the International, later renamed the Hilton. Each engagement was 4 weeks. Each engagement included 57 shows, 2 shows a night, midnight and late night, with some single show nights mixed in. The schedule was relentless by design. The hotel wanted maximum performance for maximum revenue, and Parker gave it to them because Parker's cut, which by this point in their relationship had climbed to as high as 50% of Elvis's gross earnings, went up with every performance. Let me say that again. 50%. Most managers take 10%, 15% if they are pushing it. Tom Parker was taking half of everything Elvis made. And because Parker had negotiated the contract, he controlled the terms. The Hilton paid Parker directly for certain elements. Parker had his own suite at the hotel. Parker had his own promotional deals running on the side, merchandise, programs, photographs, that Elvis didn't see a cent of. What the contract did not include was equally damaging. There were no provisions for Elvis to pursue film work during the engagement periods. The schedule left almost no time for recording. Between the 2 Vegas runs each year, Parker filled the calendar with domestic tours, not the arena tours that were becoming the new model for rock acts in the 1970s, but one-night stands in arenas and auditoriums across the country, often booked so cheaply that promoters were making more money than Elvis. Parker was booking shows the way he had booked county fairs in the 1940s. High volume, low overhead, no vision. And there was nothing in any of it about Elvis's long-term artistic development. No clause saying he had to record a minimum number of serious albums, no provision for film projects with legitimate directors who had been calling about Elvis for years. John Huston wanted him. Barbra Streisand wanted him as her co-star in A Star Is Born. Other serious filmmakers had reached out. Parker turned them all down. By 1972, Elvis Presley's professional life was a hotel contract, a touring schedule, and a manager who had him completely surrounded, and the walls were getting closer. Opening night at the International Hotel was July 31st, 1969. And I want you to understand what that night actually was because it was one of the great moments in American performance history. Elvis had spent months preparing. He rehearsed obsessively with new material, new arrangements, a full orchestra, a gospel choir, and a band of players that included some of the best musicians in the country. He was terrified. He hadn't performed live in 8 years. The movie years had kept him off every stage that mattered, and now he was walking out in front of 2,000 people in a room that the hotel had filled with celebrities, critics, and industry figures specifically to judge whether the comeback was real. He walked out in a black, karate-influenced jumpsuit that had been designed for mobility. He hit the stage, and the room exploded. Not politely, not professionally. The kind of eruption that happens when an audience realizes they're watching something they'll talk about for the rest of their lives. He played an hour and a half. He was magnetic, funny between songs, self-deprecating about the movies, and then when he sang, just when he sang, everything else disappeared. The reviews the next morning used words like electrifying, stunning, the best live performer in America. The Hollywood Reporter called it the most exciting live performance Vegas had ever seen. The engagement sold out every night, the lines wrapped around the building. The international set attendance records that had never existed before because the records had never needed to exist before. Nobody had drawn crowds like this. Elvis went home to Graceland between engagements, and he was happy. He felt like himself again. He felt like the performer he'd always wanted to be instead of the movie star Parker had turned him into. He told people those first Vegas months were the best he'd felt in years. But here's what was already true that Elvis didn't fully see yet. The hotel loved him because he was a machine that printed money. 2 shows a night, every night for 4 weeks, twice a year. That was the math of the relationship. And a machine that prints money does not get time off to explore other opportunities. It does not get to make risky artistic choices. It does not get to go to London or Tokyo or Rome, even if the whole world is asking. A machine gets maintained just well enough to keep running, and then it gets run until it breaks. By 1970, the gilded cage had been built. Elvis just hadn't noticed the bars yet. The shows that broke him. Let's talk about the mathematics of what this schedule did to a human body. 2 shows a night, a midnight show and a 2 a.m. show, 4 weeks, 57 performances per engagement, 2 engagements per year. That is 114 Las Vegas shows annually, not counting the domestic touring that Parker packed into the remaining months. Elvis's performances were not gentle affairs. He gave everything. Every night, every show, regardless of how he felt, regardless of what was happening in his personal life. The jumpsuits got more elaborate as the years went on because he was performing to the back of rooms that held 2,000 people and everything had to read large. He sweated through every show. He performed with a physicality that karate had trained him for, but that was still exhausting at 35, 37, 40 years old. And the sleep was impossible. 2 shows a night meant he rarely finished before 3 or 3:30 in the morning. He could not sleep when the adrenaline was still running through him. So he would be awake until 6 or 7 a.m. and then he would sleep through the day until it was time to do it again. His days and nights completely inverted. His body never adjusted because there was never time to adjust. By 1972, the people around him started noticing the changes. His voice was still extraordinary. That never entirely left him, even at the end. There are 1977 recordings that show the instrument was still there when he could reach it. But the range was narrowing. The control that had been effortless in 1969 required effort now. He was compensating in ways that trained ears could hear. His energy on stage was shifting too. The early Vegas shows were kinetic, unpredictable, genuinely exciting. By the mid-1970s, the performances were becoming ritualized. The same songs in roughly the same order, the same jokes between songs, the same moves. The audience still loved it because most of them were seeing Elvis for the first time, and he was still Elvis. But the people who watched night after night, the musicians, the backing singers, the hotel staff, they could see the template hardening. The spontaneity was draining out. His friend and sometime confidant Lamar Fike said it plainly years later. He said the schedule was impossible. Nobody could maintain that and stay healthy, stay sane, stay creative. But Parker kept booking and the hotel kept signing and Elvis kept showing up. Because here's the thing about Elvis that people don't always understand. He was not a confrontational man. Despite the swaggering image, despite the karate, despite the guns and the entourage and the king mythology, Elvis Presley was deeply non-confrontational when it came to the people closest to him. He complained to his friends. He did not confront Parker. He signed what Parker told him to sign. He showed up where Parker told him to show up. That combination, a controlling manager and a non-confrontational client, is how you destroy a career in slow motion, one signed contract at a time. What Vegas took. Las Vegas is not designed for human beings. It is designed for the extraction of money from human beings, and it does that job brilliantly by removing every natural cue that would otherwise tell you to stop. No windows in the casino, and no clocks on the walls. Light that stays the same at 3 in the afternoon and 3 in the morning. Temperature controlled so your body never signals discomfort. Everything is structured to keep you exactly where you are, doing exactly what you're doing for exactly 1 more minute than you intended. Elvis Presley lived inside that environment for months out of every year for 7 consecutive years. And what Vegas does to visitors in 72 hours, it did to Elvis across nearly a decade. The entourage was real and the entourage was a problem. The Memphis Mafia, the group of friends and employees who surrounded Elvis constantly, served a genuine purpose in the early years. They were loyal, they kept things running, they kept strangers at a distance. But inside the Vegas bubble, they became something else. They became enablers by necessity. Not because they wanted to hurt Elvis, but because the only way to stay in Elvis's orbit was to give Elvis what Elvis wanted. And what Elvis increasingly wanted were the pills. The prescription drug use had started in the Army years, which is where many servicemen of his generation first encountered the amphetamines that military culture used to keep soldiers alert on long missions. By the time Elvis hit Vegas seriously, the pills were a structured part of his daily routine. Uppers to get through the shows, downers to come off the adrenaline afterward, sleeping pills to force the body into rest, painkillers for the physical damage the schedule was accumulating. Dr. George Nicopolis, who the press would later call Dr. Nick, prescribed enormous quantities of controlled substances to Elvis over the years. In the last 20 months of Elvis's life alone, Dr. Nicopolis prescribed more than 10,000 doses of various drugs, narcotics, sedatives, and amphetamines. The exact number is staggering when you say it out loud. But here's what gets lost in the Elvis drug narrative. The drugs were a response to a schedule that no human body could sustain without chemical assistance. They were not the disease, they were the symptom. The disease was the contract. The disease was Tom Parker booking 2 shows a night for a man approaching middle age and calling it management. Vegas took something else too. It took Elvis's marriage. Priscilla Presley has been honest in the years since his death about the fact that the Vegas years changed him fundamentally. The isolation, the schedule, the inversion of day and night, the parade of women who were always available in a way that Priscilla, back at Graceland, raising their daughter Lisa Marie, could not be. They divorced in 1973. Elvis was devastated. The shows went on. The Last Contract, 1976. Elvis Presley is 41 years old. Look at photographs of Elvis from that year and compare them to photographs from 1969. The difference is not the passage of 7 years. It is the passage of something else entirely, a physical deterioration that goes beyond normal aging, that speaks of a body under sustained and extraordinary stress. He had gained significant weight, which the tabloids savaged him for. But the weight was partly a medical consequence of prescription drugs, sleep disruption, and the cortisol dysregulation that comes from chronic stress and chronic sleep deprivation. His face was puffy, his hands sometimes shook. There were nights on stage when he forgot lyrics, slurred his speech, and seemed genuinely unwell to audiences who had paid to see the king. The reviews had turned. Not all of them, and not forever, but some writers who had praised the early shows with genuine awe were now writing with concern underneath the criticism. Rolling Stone ran pieces.
Publications that had ignored country music and Las Vegas for years were suddenly paying attention to Elvis in the way you pay attention to a car accident you can see coming. And in 1976, Tom Parker negotiated a contract extension with the Hilton that locked Elvis into more of the same. Colonel Parker had his own reasons to keep the machine running, regardless of the cost to the machine. By the mid-1970s, Parker had developed a significant gambling habit of his own. He was losing money at the Hilton's casino tables, reportedly millions over the years. The Hilton held that debt. And the way the Hilton collected on that debt was by keeping Elvis under contract, which meant Parker had a personal financial incentive to keep Elvis performing, regardless of Elvis's condition. The hotel knew what Elvis looked like on stage in 1976. They had eyes. They had 2,000 people a night watching. They knew his condition was declining. They renewed the contract anyway because even a diminished Elvis Presley still sold out every single show. The rooms filled, the money came in. What happened to the man inside the jumpsuit was not their department. Elvis told members of his inner circle during this period that he felt trapped, that he wanted to stop, that he was tired in ways he could not describe. People who were there say he talked about the contract the way a prisoner talks about a sentence. Something to endure until it was over, something he had no power to change. He was wrong about the power. He had lawyers. He could have fought, but that would have meant confronting Parker. Elvis Presley, even at the end, did not confront Tom Parker. What really killed Elvis? On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found unresponsive on the bathroom floor of Graceland. He was 42 years old. The official cause of death was cardiac arrhythmia, a heart that stopped. And the tabloids wrote about the drugs and the food and the weight and the excess, and they were not entirely wrong about any of it. But they were wrong about the cause. The cause was the contract. Think about what Elvis Presley's career could have been if Tom Parker had been a different kind of manager in 1969. If instead of locking Elvis into a hotel for 7 years, Parker had taken the momentum of the comeback special and aimed it at the world. A world tour. London, where the Beatles and the Stones had proven you could fill stadiums. Tokyo, where Elvis worship had been a cultural phenomenon since the 1950s. Sydney, Paris, Rio. The world had been waiting for Elvis Presley to come to them for 20 years, and he never came because one man without a passport could not leave the country with him. Serious film work. John Huston never stopped being interested. A Star is Born with Barbra Streisand in 1976 would have been a cultural event. Streisand wanted Elvis. Her people reached out to Parker directly. Parker turned it down because the Vegas schedule did not leave room. Streisand made the film with Chris Christopherson, and it was a massive hit. Elvis watched it and reportedly told friends it should have been him. Albums that mattered. In the 1970s, artists like Marvin Gaye, David Bowie, and Bruce Springsteen were making records that rewired what popular music could be. Elvis had the voice, the range, the musical intelligence to be in that conversation. Instead, Parker kept feeding him soundtrack albums and budget label releases because they were easy and they generated quick cash without requiring anyone to think too hard. Elvis could have had a legacy like Frank Sinatra, who reinvented himself in the 1950s and remained a vital artist into his 70s. Instead, he had a hotel contract and a manager who skimmed 50%. The cardiac arrhythmia that killed Elvis Presley on August 16, 1977 was the final bill on a decade of physical punishment that the Vegas contract had required him to absorb. His heart stopped because his heart had been asked to do too much for too long. And Tom Parker, when told that Elvis was dead, reportedly asked someone to find out if the death would affect the upcoming tour dates. What happened to them all? After Elvis died, Tom Parker lost no time. He immediately moved to secure his position regarding the estate. He had deals in motion, merchandise agreements, licensing arrangements. The machinery of Elvis Presley as a commercial property had been running for decades, and Parker intended for it to keep running with him attached to it. Priscilla Presley, as executor of the estate along with Elvis's father Vernon, eventually had Parker's management contract with the estate reviewed by a court. The review found what insiders had suspected for years, that Parker's 50% arrangement had constituted a conflict of interest and that he had failed in his fiduciary duty to Elvis. In 1983, Parker was removed from any role in the Elvis Presley estate. He received a settlement and walked away. He moved to Las Vegas, of course he did, and lived there until his death in 1997. He gambled until the end. He never gave a meaningful interview about his role in Elvis's decline. He died at 87 years old in his bed. The Hilton kept booking Elvis tribute artists into its showrooms for decades. The hotel that broke Elvis kept selling his image long after he was gone. If that is not Las Vegas at its most honest, I do not know what is. Priscilla Presley transformed Graceland into what it is today, a destination that draws over 600,000 visitors annually, one of the most visited private residences in America. She fought for the estate when it was worth almost nothing and built it into a cultural institution. The woman the Vegas years had kept at a distance became the guardian of everything the Vegas years had tried to consume. Lisa Marie Presley grew up in the shadow of her father's legend and lived a life that reflected the inherited instability of what Graceland had become: the pressure, the money, the mythology. She passed away in January of 2023 at 54 years old. The same age her father had been moving toward, the same weight of legacy pressing down. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, never recovered. He died in 1979, less than 2 years after his son. And the International Hotel, rebranded as the Las Vegas Hilton, then the LVH, then Westgate Las Vegas, still stands on Paradise Road. If you walk through the lobby today, Elvis is everywhere. His photographs are on the walls, his name on plaques. The showroom where he played bears his name. There is a museum on the property with his jumpsuits in glass cases. They built a monument to the man they helped destroy, and they charge admission to see it. This was the story of Elvis Presley and the contract that caged him. A man who was once the most exciting performer alive, reduced by bad management and corporate math to a machine running on prescription drugs and obligation, performing himself to death in a desert hotel while the world he should have conquered waited for him to arrive. He never arrived, not because he could not, because one man without a passport would not let him leave. Benny Binion built a casino on trust, and his own blood destroyed it from inside. Frank Rosenthal built a sports empire on a stolen foundation, and Tom Parker took the greatest natural talent in American music history and turned him into a 2-shows-a-night attraction with a 25-year shelf life and a contract that paid the manager as much as it paid the king. The house always wins. In Vegas, that is the first lesson and the last one. But sometimes the house does not win because it is smarter. It wins because it built the room, locked the door, and the person inside never quite understood that the golden cage and the real one look exactly the same from the inside. That was the story of Elvis Presley, and that was Las Vegas. Which part of this story shocked you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you love discovering the real people behind the neon, hit subscribe because every legend had a story, and Vegas never forgets.